Perfect. So a very quick introduction to the session, Julian, before I hand over to you for the presentation. Thank you very much, attendees, for joining in for this webinar on the topic of everything you need to know about Scrum versus Kanban. As you all know, Julian Cambridge will be our presenter for today, and just as you all, I'm also eagerly looking forward to this presentation this evening. Should you have any questions, you can type to the questions tab. We'll have the first 30 to 40 minutes for the presentation, and we'll have the last 15-20 minutes for the Q&A. Julian Cambridge is an accredited Kanban trainer for Kanban University, a certified Scrum Professional with Scrum Alliance, and an authorized instructor for ICAgile. Julian's IT consultancy experience comes from the banking and digital sectors, working for clients such as CIPD, Brevin Dolphin, Investec Wealth and Investment, and Investec Private Bank. As I mentioned, thank you very much once again, Julian, for doing this webinar for us. Without taking much time, I'd like to hand over to you for today's presentation. So yeah, over to you, Julian. Looking forward to this webinar.
Fantastic, and thank you for a very warm welcome there, Shruti. And I'm always happy to get involved with KnowledgeHut. I know the wealth of knowledge and the wealth of courses that are being taught across the Atlantic in India. So very happy to be a part of that. Okay, so welcome to everybody who has attended, where I will be doing a webinar on Scrum versus Kanban. Okay, and we will touch on quite a lot of topics, the difference between the two frameworks. Of course, they both come under the umbrella of Agile. I will be touching a bit more on my introduction, just about who I am. And then hopefully at the end, we will have time to answer some questions from yourself. So very much looking forward to this one. These are two topics I enjoy conversing about. It's always the question on people's lips, Scrum versus Kanban, which one is better? Do we do either, or do we do a combination of both? These are definitely the conversations that I've had over the last couple of years, especially during the pandemic, where we joined meetup groups and we watch Kanban exchanges, and these conversations blossom, and we start here, and who knows where we may end up. Okay, so a bit about me, as Shruti gave you an introduction earlier. My name is Julian Cambridge. I'm based in the UK. I'm based in London, England. So the time here is actually 2:30 in the afternoon. I do know it is the evening across the pond in India. So thank you all for joining in, for joining me on this Friday evening where you are. Okay, I started in the early 2000s. I attended university and I did a degree in computing with business. I then followed up that degree with a master's in business computing. So that really set me on my way to working in IT and working as a consultant. As Shruti mentioned, I'm an accredited Kanban trainer. That is via Kanban University. So I teach and deliver all the Kanban courses, which allow you to be Kanban certified. I'm also a certified Scrum Professional via Scrum Alliance. I did my certified Scrum Master certification probably about 8-9 years ago now, and I've carried on working amongst the great people at Scrum Alliance. And I'm now at Certified Scrum Professional level. And I also deliver quite a few courses for ICAgile here in the UK. Of course, in the pandemic, we've been lucky enough to turn to virtual teaching, where I have delivered quite a few ICAgile courses virtually, enabling people to get their Agile certifications. Okay, so following university, way back then, showing my age a little, I was unable to join a consultancy called SQS. So if I can work from the bottom upwards, SQS are now called Explio Group. And I started my software testing career all the way back then, where we worked in a traditional approach. We used waterfall. We wrote our test cases. We then executed our test cases, and we ensured that the software was great to go live. Okay, And that was me as a young consultant being sent all over the UK to different clients where I was able to learn very much about the software development lifecycle. Following SQS, Explio Group, I then went to Camelot. Camelot in the UK are the company that do the National Lottery. So I was actually working on nationallottery.co.uk, very much, again, doing software testing, but there was also a bit of Agile in there as well. We were practicing daily scrums and daily stand-ups, giving feedback sessions, and it was very much a continuous delivery where it came to software. I then worked in a digital media agency where we had different clients that would ask us to manage their workload, i.e. website development and everything that came from development all the way to going live. And it's not until I got into banking where I really discovered it is all about your way of working. Okay, it's all about your way of working. We all have developers who are highly skilled. We then have project managers and software testers and user acceptance people, and then it goes live. But how quickly, with the same quality, can we do our software development, enable the user to have a great experience as well as a product that works? And I went into the investment banking area in the City of London, and very much did all of my Agile certifications. So I started off with Scrum Alliance, and I did the Certified Scrum Master course and learned the Scrum Master role and contributed to the Scrum teams that I was a part of. And this is where it got really exciting, because then for the next, say, 4 or 5 clients, again, very much banking, you can see Shawbrook Bank, Investec Wealth and Investment, Brewin Dolphin, very much an Agile way of working. And it was predominantly Scrum. Scrum was the most popular framework, is the most popular framework that Agile has produced, or Agile uses. If you like, organizations all across the world are very much in favor of Scrum. It's the most popular. And then Kanban came around, and it was more of a mixture of the two. So we are going to do Scrum and action Scrum, but we're going to use a Kanban board so we can all know what we're doing at any given time. And I thought that was very interesting. And at that point, I didn't even know Kanban could be an entire method by itself without Scrum. So very much it was Scrum with a bit of Kanban to help us cross the line. And then as I then got further on in my career, again, sticking in banking, sticking in the Agile way of working, I then was able to learn that Kanban could be a method by itself, and Kanban doesn't have to just be related to software development. You can use Kanban anywhere. Kanban is an element of queuing. It comes from lean manufacturing. Okay, so Kanban can be used in many different industries outside of software development, and that is what makes Kanban so exciting, which I will talk to you about as this webinar goes on. So this is me, Julian Cambridge. Quick recap, undergrad and a postgrad in computer science, if you like, accredited Kanban trainer with Kanban University. I've got ties with Scrum Alliance and also work very closely with ICAgile. A lot of my career has been in the banking side, especially the latter part. And I am very fond of being Agile. Not just working in Agile, but actually being Agile. It then becomes a mindset. It becomes a personality. It becomes a character. It becomes a way of doing things. Okay, so we look at Kanban, and in the Kanban method, I will be speaking about change principles and what Agile means to actually adopting to working in an Agile way. It's just not a process that you learn and at 5 p.m. you switch off and you go home and then you're Agile again from 9 a.m. Agile could potentially become a way of life, and it then becomes a mindset, and you're able to apply that into your work. Okay, fantastic. Benefits of Scrum. What is the point in Scrum? Why are we doing it? What are the benefits of saying, hello team, today we are going to park this traditional approach. We're not going to do waterfall anymore. We are going to bring in this fantastic Agile framework called Scrum. the whole team begins to look at each other and they're asking us, well, what is this Scrum and why do we need it? We've been working like this for the last 10 years and it's absolutely fine. Or is it fine? Are software development being delivered late? Are we not doing it incrementally? Are we shoehorning quality? Okay, so I'll be talking about the benefits of Scrum and how Scrum could be phenomenal for an organization or for a team working in the software development world. And of course, if you're going to look at the benefits of Scrum, we'll be looking at how to implement Scrum into an organization. You don't just wake up one day and here is Scrum and off we go. That has to be a process. That has to be a change in the way we do things, the change in the potentially even our job titles may change, the way we work. So how do we implement Scrum into an organization? And of course, we have Scrum at team level. Okay, we all are divided into our development teams. You may have software testers, software developers, project managers, team leaders, graphic designers, UX designers. How do we then apply Scrum to the team level? And then, of course, off the back of being successful in applying Scrum at team level, how do we then apply Scrum across our organization? How do we then get the whole organization working in a Scrum fashion? Okay, so these are the topics that we will be going through, definitely on the Scrum side. And then we move on to benefits of Kanban. Why do we do Kanban? What is Kanban all about? Why do we need Kanban as an additional method to Scrum? Can we combine the two together or do we use one in isolation? Why do we bring Kanban into our way of working? Again, we've been working like this for 10 years. Why does it matter? Why are we changing now? And then, of course, we need to implement Kanban into our organization. Easier said than done. It looks fantastic as the 6th bullet point down on the slides here, implementing Kanban into an organization. But there's one thing to read it, and then there's another thing to do it. And very similar to what we speak about in Scrum, we're looking at Kanban at team level, and then we go on to speak about Kanban at organization level. How do we scale Kanban? How do we have Kanban be effective across the organization and across all departments and have a Kanban philosophy, a Kanban culture in our organization, as well as Scrum, or as well as Agile as a mindset to start off with. Okay, so very much looking forward to going through these bullet points as time goes on. And I'm very much looking forward to answering any questions that we may have at this time. Okay, so let us start off with Scrum. What is Scrum? Scrum came from the term scrummage, which was used in the sport of rugby. It was when they all huddled together at the beginning there, very much a term used coming together. And this was in the early 90s. And since the early 90s, there's been Scrum Alliance, Scrum.org, which are very much promoting Scrum courses and Scrum delivery. But there is also case studies. There's case studies of how Scrum has been effective. Okay, so we've got a traditional approach. What happens in a traditional approach? Let's say you have a project that runs over 12 months and you're using waterfall. So perhaps the first 3 months were all about gathering requirements and making sure that we've got the right requirements that we are going to need to be able to develop our product. After that initial development stage, we might then go into, after that initial requirement stage, we may then go into development, and the developers will look at the requirements and then be able to build from there. After our developers have done their job, we then go into testing, and then testing, do what needs to be done, whether that be system integration testing, user acceptance testing, and then you might have a 3-month slot just for that. You may then have a slot for turning defects round, and then of course user acceptance testing. And then at the end of the year, then everything will go live as one deployment. And that was the traditional approach, and it's worked for years, been very successful. But it also has pinpointed issues, has pinpointed problems. And that word is change. How much does the traditional approach cater for change? What if your requirements change 5 months down the line, 6 months down the line? What if what was in the requirements is not what has come out on the other side? And this became a problem, and it became a huge issue, especially as software was so widely brought and spreading across the world where everything is software related now. And this is where Agile came in, and then the Scrum framework came in. And the Scrum framework was all about doing everything in one iteration, but dividing that into blocks. And those blocks are called sprints. But we will talk about sprints as the slides go on. But Scrum was all about continuous deployment and continuous testing and continuous development, continuous reviewing of the requirements from the beginning of the project all the way to the end, as opposed to having set blocks where only one thing can be done at one time. Okay. So Scrum was split into, or is split into 3 different areas. You've got Scrum artifacts, you've got Scrum ceremonies, and you've got the Scrum team. So I'm going to work from left to right, and I'm going to try and paint a picture of what this board actually looks like. Okay. So we've got a product that needs to be developed. The customer, the user, approaches their development team and says, well, we need this built. Okay. So we then create a product backlog. And the product backlog is our to-do list. This is what we need to do to get this product into live or to get this product off the shelf. We create a to-do list. Everything in that product backlog should add value. If it doesn't add value, then it shouldn't be there. Okay, this is our product backlog. So if you've got a mobile phone, your product backlog might be calendar, emails, calls, text messages, phone calls, pictures, videos. These are all the different features of your iPhone or your mobile phone. And this makes up our product backlog. And your product backlog could be anything from 10 items to 1,000 items, depending on how big your product is. Okay, so let's say we have 100 items in our product backlog, ready to work on, ready to go. So how do we manage this product backlog? How do we manage our to-do list? Well, we can separate it into 2-week increments, and we can call that a sprint. Okay, 2-week deliverables, we can call this a sprint. And in our product backlog, we may take 10 items that sort of all work together or are in the same area when it comes to features, and we can create a sprint backlog. Okay, and we can say we're going to take these 10 items from the product backlog and actively work on these and call these a sprint backlog. Okay, and then at the end of the sprint, we've then got something that we can deliver at the end of it, which is where we've got the word increment in there. So we are continuously developing software and continuously releasing software to the user. Okay, so that's our product backlog, it's our to-do list. Our sprint backlog is a section of that to-do list as to what we are working on now. And then the increment is what we deliver at the end of it. Okay, now I'm going to come back to these Scrum artifacts because they tie in very well with our Scrum ceremonies. And our Scrum ceremonies, we've got 5 of them. We've got sprint, sprint planning, daily Scrum, sprint retrospective, and sprint review. I think there's a bit of a spelling mistake there in retrospective. I see there's more P's than necessary. Okay, so let's have a look at our Scrum ceremonies. We've got the sprint itself. The sprint is the duration of time that we will need to work on our sprint backlog. Okay, that on average is about 2 weeks. The Scrum guide, as produced by scrum.org and Scrum Alliance, will tell you that a sprint is time boxed up to a month. But everywhere I've gone, everywhere I've worked across the world, you usually see a sprint at 2 weeks. Okay, so we've got 2 weeks to work through a set of items. Okay, that is our sprint. Now we've got sprint planning. In sprint planning, let's say you come into work on a Monday, you've got a 2-week sprint, so that's 10 working days, Monday to Friday, then the following Monday to Friday, that's your 2 weeks. So on the first Monday, you'll have a sprint planning session. The development team will walk into a room or into a meeting room, maybe virtually as we do now, and they will look at the product backlog and they will decide what items shall we bring into our sprint. Okay, and then we'll have that conversation, and we're looking at priority. We are also looking at estimating how long items will take. And we'll also be looking at what items go together. Okay, is it probably better to work on photos and videos at the same time if we were looking at the mobile phone model? Okay, and we use different techniques to estimate our work in terms of how large or how small a work item could be. Okay, and KnowledgeHut offer many a Scrum course that really delves into different ways of sprint planning and how you can get the best out of the Scrum ceremonies that we have here on the board. Okay, so it's your sprint planning session, usually around 2 hours. There is a time box of 8 hours, though I've never been in an 8-hour sprint planning session before, but 2 hours is more than likely. And you're looking at your product backlog and you're saying, right, we are going to bring in item number 1, followed by item number 2. And those items will most likely be ordered, some element of version control, 1.1, 1.2, and so forth. And the whole team would agree that is this item ready to be worked on? That's where we potentially have a definition of ready. Are the developers saying that that item is ready to be worked on? Are the requirements clear enough? Are the user stories well written? The testers are looking at the stories saying, well, is it testable? Is there enough information to be able to test this once it comes over to our team? So these are the conversations that will be happening when sprint planning is involved. Okay, so at the end of our sprint planning session, we should have our sprint planned out. We know how many resources will be in. We know how many of our team can have capacity to work on. So we pull in work accordingly. If we've only got 10 people in for the next 2 weeks, some of our team might be on a KnowledgeHut course, some may be on annual leave. So you pull in the work that you are able to complete within a sprint. That is your goal. Okay, so by the end of your sprint planning session, you should have all of your items that you're going to work in that sprint. They should be estimated, prioritized, and it should meet the capacity and demands of your team. Okay, so once your sprint planning session has ended and it's your Monday, when you then come into Tuesday, you then start your daily scrums. Okay, very much known as a daily stand-up, widely used across the world. But a daily scrum is a 15-minute meeting at the beginning of each day. And every team member will say, well, what have they worked on yesterday? What are they working on today? And does the team have any blockers? Do you have any blockers? And you're reporting this information in your daily scrum, your daily stand-up, every single day for the duration of the sprint. And you only talk about items within the current sprint. Anything outside of that conversation, you may say, I will take it offline. And me and Joe or me and Bob will be able to talk about this after our daily scrum. Okay, and the daily scrum is a great ceremony to be able to pass on information, receive information, and transparency. So everyone knows what everyone is working on at any given time. You may even have a board. This is where potentially Kanban comes into play. You may have a board that shows, well, this is to do, this is in progress, and this is done. And then you're giving your daily scrum in front of the board, which will allow people to visualize exactly what you're working on, as opposed to just hearing it verbally. Okay. And then we go on to sprint retrospective with the extra P in there for no reason. But our sprint retrospective, okay, this comes at the end of our sprint, and that actually follows a sprint review. So I'm going to speak about sprint review first. Our sprint review comes on the last Friday or the last day of your sprint, where you invite the customer. And the customer is then able to give you feedback on the work that you have done. So you've completed your sprint, you've got to the Friday, you then work with the business or the user or the customer, and they give you feedback and say, well, this is absolutely fantastic, or this could be better, or continue as you go on. And it gives the team the opportunity to present their work and to show off their work and to say, look what we've been working on. We've had a fantastic sprint. This is what we have been working on, and we are happy to present this to you. And then it gives the opportunity to feedback. And this takes place in every single sprint. So if you've got 2-week sprints over a project of a year, you are continuously getting feedback from the user. We then go to our sprint retrospective following our sprint review. And our sprint retrospective is where the team have a lessons learned session. The team get together and the team will talk amongst themselves and say, well, what have we done well and what could we potentially do better? Now, if you see the wording that I'm using, it's not saying what have we done bad. We don't want to go with a negative narrative and then it turning into a finger pointing session. It's looking at, right, we've done this well in our last 2 weeks. Let's continue as we go on. You can then point out other team members and say, yeah, John was really good when he helped me with this bit of testing that I had trouble with. And then you can, you can shout out other team members and talk about the great positivity that they've brought to the team. Or if something hasn't gone well, you can say, well, this is probably something we can do better. Maybe our daily scrums were going on for too long. The information given out in our daily scrums wasn't good enough. So these are potentially things that we can do better. And we carry that into our next sprint. So it's a continuous learning and continuous improvement. Okay. I'm just going to move over to the far right of the screen where you've got Scrum team. And our Scrum team is made up of developers, a product owner, and a Scrum master. Now, what are these positions? Now, developers is what they call the development team. And the developers is not just a developer who codes in C# or Angular or native script. Developers make up the team of testers, of course, developers, UX designers, business analysts, anyone that plays a part in creating the product are labeled underneath the umbrella of developers. And then we have our product owner. Our product owner is responsible for the product backlog. The product owner is the only person that can amend the product backlog. The product owner is responsible that everything in the product backlog gets delivered, that everything on the product backlog has value, most likely has direct one-on-one communication with the customer to be able to create and produce this product backlog. Okay, and that is the role of the product owner. Of course, the product owner works very closely with its developers and gets advice based on what is achievable and what is not achievable and how long things will take, and potentially refining the backlog, making sure that there's no waste and everything is in order. But ultimately, it becomes the product owner's decision what goes into our product backlog, what adds value, what can be deleted, and what can be edited. Okay. And then the most important, or well, they are all important, but we have a very important position here in the Scrum Master. And the Scrum Master coaches the team on how to get the best out of Scrum. Okay, now many a time I've seen the position of Scrum Master get confused with Project Manager. Very two different things. A project manager manages the time and budget and ensures that the project goes well and is delivered on time. But the Scrum Master ensures that the team get the best out of Scrum. The Scrum Master facilitates the team. You would say the Scrum Master coaches the team members. Are we getting the best out of our product backlog? Are we looking at what is our velocity? How much effort can our team handle in a sprint? Okay, are we getting the best out of our sprint planning, our daily scrums, our sprint reviews, our sprint retrospectives? Are we working to the maximum of our capacity? And how do we improve? The Scrum Master is also a coach of the team. How can we get better? Do we have someone who doesn't speak much at the daily scrum? Do we have someone that speaks too much at our sprint retrospective? How can we have balance amongst the team? How can we get everybody working to their maximum strength? Okay, this is our Scrum Master. And this takes me in to this slide here. Now, if you see the Scrum Master sort of cartoon character, very much a referee type cartoon image there, the person blowing the whistle, the person controlling the sporting game. And in this instance, the Scrum Master controls the method of Scrum that the team have adopted. Okay, so let's have a look at what we have here. We've got a green arrow all the way around the circle, which is a sprint. That is our duration of time that we decide to do our work in. Okay, we've got a product backlog in blue to the right of that diagram. From the product backlog, we create a sprint backlog, and we say in our green arrow going around, orbiting the circle there, we are going to work on the 10 or so items that we have pulled from the product backlog into our sprint backlog. At the end of our sprint, we should have a potentially shippable increment of a product. And then we can shake hands and say, we are our definition of done. Now, this is an interesting one. What is our definition of done? You may have heard the term exit criteria. You might have heard the term entry criteria. And you definitely heard me say definition of ready a few minutes ago. So you've got your definition of ready. Is this product backlog fit for purpose? Is the item that we're putting into our sprint testable? Is the user story clear and there's no ambiguity? Is the requirement signed off by the user? And then our definition of done is at the other end of the scale. Has it been tested? Have all test cases been complete? Do we have any remaining defects? Has the user signed it off? Are we ready to deploy live? This is your checklist for your definition of done. And every team may have their own unique definition of done. So we just look in the middle there, and you've got the sprint events. You've got your planning meeting, your sprint planning, where we're deciding the items from our product backlog into our sprint backlog. You've then got your daily scrum, where the development team take place and give updates about what they're working on today, yesterday, and any blockers. You've got your product owner that's trying to juggle the product backlog there, all the items, ensuring that there's value in each one and there's no waste and everything is fit for purpose on there. And then you've got your Scrum Master, making sure we are all doing it the best that we can, and how can we improve, measuring our capacity, our velocity, and how much effort our team can handle at any one time. Then you've got your sprint review, where you invite the user, you invite the customer, where the customer is able to give feedback. The development team are able to show what they've done. It's a bit of a show and tell meeting. You may share your screen and say, this is what we've developed, this is how it works, this was the requirement, and we're happy to deliver this for you. And the user or the customer will be able to give feedback and be able to move forward from there. And then we've got your sprint retrospective, which is at the end of your sprint, which should be a learning session. We're congratulating people on what they've done well. We're congratulating the team. We're acknowledging what we've done well. But also we're looking at, well, what could we have done better? Again, this is not a finger pointing session where I believe John did this and Bob didn't do that. This is well, based on this process and based on the feedback in our sprint review session, perhaps we can improve this and monitor it until we get to a source of satisfaction. And the Scrum Master is facilitating all of this. So you're not going to get an overbearing voice, one person talking more than the other. Everyone will be able to give equal opportunity to share their thoughts and be able to improve as a team. Now, this is an interesting one, Scrum of Scrums. Now, why have I come here? We've just been talking about a team, one team in particular that has gone through their sprint planning and are now ready to work on the product and are delivering to the customer. Okay, and that is your one team in your organization. But as everybody knows, there's more than one team in an organization. This is what we say scale. This is when we scale Agile, when we scale Scrum. And we have that Scrum team and the Scrum method grow in our organizations. So where we had one Scrum team, you now have 2 Scrum teams, you now have 3, you now have 6, you potentially now have 12. And you're walking along the development floor and there's Scrum teams in every corner working on their respective products. Okay, but we need to establish good communication. There's no point my team in the far left working on Scrum and someone else's team on the other side of the room, and we don't know what each other are doing. It's very good and well, we have our daily Scrums and we're reporting back to our unique and individual teams. But what if we are working on identical products that when they go to live affect each other? Or we don't want to be crossing each other and working on the same thing. And this is where we have a system or method called Scrum of Scrums. And you can see in the diagram here, if you're looking at the bottom layer, you've got team A, team B, and that goes on to team F. And then you may take the Scrum Master from each team and they will come together and discuss what they've been working on, what defects they have, what features they're working on, what dates that they will be deploying to live. What is their definition of ready? What is their definition of done? It's an exchange of information. And the first diagram on the left here, you've got Scrum Team A, Scrum Team B, Scrum Team C, all separate teams working on their individual features and products. You've taken the Scrum Master from each team and they've gone into the bubble just ahead and they're having that conversation and they're conversing. Okay, think organizations that have multiple offices all across the world. How does everybody know at any given time what the other team is working on? And then you've got the same on the right. You've got Scrum Team D, Scrum Team E, and Scrum Team F. And then, of course, similar, you've got the Scrum Masters from those 3 teams, and they meet up together and they talk about defects that has happened when they are deploying live, their definition of ready, their definition of done, the features that they're working on, and making sure everybody is aligned onto the same page. And then based on this format or this structure, you've then got a representative from each one of these 2 teams on the left and right there, and they come together to ensure that all information is transparent and visible by all, okay? And we'd be very surprised how much of this does not happen, okay? Very much when I'm delivering courses, which I will be doing for KnowledgeHut now, very much when I'm delivering courses and I'm hearing people's experiences, a lot of the time they're saying, well, we don't know what the other team is working on. We are blind to what the other team are doing or what other areas of the business. And this is a great example, especially where Scrum is concerned, where we're able to be visible and transparent, and we're able to ensure that everybody at any given time knows what other people are working on. You can get so streamlined and caught up in your own work that you become quite oblivious to what's happening left and right of you. Okay, and that is Scrum of Scrums. Okay, and we will move swiftly on to Kanban, one of my favorite methods here. Kanban, a very interesting one because popularity will tell you Scrum is the most used. Everything is about Scrum. We want a Scrum Master, we want a product owner, we need a team of developers, let's release every 2 weeks. This is fantastic. The business across the road, they do Scrum and it works completely fine. And then you have Kanban, and Kanban a lot of the time gets used where Scrum is already in place. So you might have a Scrum method in a workplace and the Scrum team put up a board on the wall and it's got to do, in progress, and in done, and done. And then as the Scrum team are working through their sprints, they're moving the items from one column to the other. And people may even call that Scrumban or a Scrum board. But elements of Kanban you can see when people are moving the items from one side to the other. But Kanban is so much more than that. Kanban, outside of software development, we use it all the time. Kanban is great for knowing where an item is at any given time. And there's many examples about Kanban that I can give. in the everyday world, but for this seminar, I will stick to software development, where I will show you in a couple of slides what a Kanban board looks like in where there's only Kanban being used in the organization. But for now, I'm going to introduce you to Kanban and give you an idea as to why people are fond of this method. Okay, it comes from the lean framework of Agile. It comes from manufacturing, which was the Toyota production system in the 1930s. And Kanban is actually can be translated in Japanese to signal card. It's a signal being sent to say, well, this is what we are going to work on now. Okay, and it's very much like a round robin, again, very much used in manufacturing. It sends a clear signal as to when a machine or a person has capacity to take on more work. Okay, this is what Kanban is all about. And I'm going to just give you a bit of history with Kanban, because Kanban very much was made popular. It always existed, but it was made popular in the software development world by David Anderson, who heads up Kanban University, where a lot of the Kanban courses are delivered via institutes such as KnowledgeHut. And David Anderson visited a park in the Far East called the Imperial Gardens. As he was walking into the park, they gave him a ticket. Now, he didn't need to pay for entry, but they gave him a ticket, and then he went into the park. And then he realized once he was in there, the park was at the absolute correct capacity for what the park could offer. It was very much a park where you go for peace and tranquility. Perhaps you may meditate, somewhere where you can just sit down and relax. So it's not a park where you want people running around or too overpopulated. You want to be able to be free and just have the space and time that you need. On exit, he gave the ticket back to the person at the front, and he then realized that they use that ticketing system so they can see how many people are in the park at any given time. How many people can the park handle at any given time? And that's where the idea and the thought process to Kanban in software development got formed by David Anderson. It's a very interesting story. If you've got time, just do Google it on YouTube or so. There's many a video where David Anderson gives talks on Kanbans, and you can hear that story in more detail. Okay, so let's just go a bit more in depth when it comes to Kanban. And we've got three sections here. We've got general practices, we've got change principles, and you've got service delivery principles. Now, your general practices are the everyday things you need to do to be able to make Kanban work. Your change principles are how do we change as a team to adopt Kanban, and your service delivery principles is, well, you're trying to create a service for a customer. A customer has a request and you are trying to deliver it. So how do we apply Kanban in that context? So let's go through the points on the board here. So general practices, visualize. We need to visualize our work. So I gave you a bit of an example there, to do, in progress, and done, but you may maximize that. So if you're in a software development team, you may have to do, you may have development, you may then have tests, you may then have UAT, user acceptance testing, and then you may have go live. And you're moving the work items within each column or each department there. So you can easily see where the work is at any given time. You can also see, well, this ticket has a defect on it. We might put a red mark on this ticket here. And we're able to then, the whole team are able to see, well, we might have a blocker here because there's a defect and we cannot move forward until we can turn that around. So it's all about visualization, transparency. Everyone can see what you're doing at any given time. These are the benefits of our Kanban board. And then we limit work in progress, WIP, work in progress. How much work can we handle at any given time? Okay, how do we ensure quality? If we're working on too many things at once, what then happens to our staff? They might be unmotivated. They might be shoehorning quality just to get through the number of items as quickly as possible. Sometimes the faster you go, the more issues it may cause. But if we limit work in progress to what we can handle, we see our working practices get much better. Okay, and then we're managing the flow, going in hand with limiting work in progress and visualization there. We're managing the flow. We're making sure that the items go through the Kanban board very routinely, so we're able to give accurate estimation days. If our work item has joined the Kanban board on this day, we expect in 25 days that it should be coming out at the other end. And we're managing that flow. We're looking at stuff such as lead time. How long does it take an item to get from one side of the board to the other? Okay, we're talking about making policies explicit. When I say policies explicit, to do, development, test, UAT, you know exactly if an item is under the development column, that's where it is. It's an explicit policy to that area. There's no ambiguity. It's very clear. You make policies explicit so you don't get one column confused with another. Similar to Scrum, we've got feedback loops. So we had sprint planning in Scrum, we had sprint review in Scrum, but here we also have replenishment meetings and workflow meetings. Are we ensuring that our Kanban is working well? What items are we bringing into our Kanban system? Okay, feedback loops, and we may have our daily stand-ups in front of our Kanban board every day, continuously sharing information. The last one there on the general practices is improve collaboratively and evolve experimentally. Let's work together to get this going. Let's work together to make this work. But are we going to get it right the first time? No, we're going to have to evolve experimentally and see what works and see what doesn't work. And then as time goes on, we will become better as a team. Okay? And then you've got your change principles. You start with what you do now. Very unlike Scrum. Scrum, you have a Scrum Master, you have a product owner, you have developers. Kanban, you don't need specific positions or job titles. You can just go in and work with what you have. Start with what you do now. Do not try to change the wheel here, but you're adding Kanban as a process so you can manage the flow of work. So you're understanding current processes as they are already practiced, and then you're building off of that. Okay, you're respecting existing roles, responsibilities, and job titles. You may have a project manager, you may have a business analyst, you might have positions that don't necessarily relate to Scrum, but we're using Kanban so we can just work with what we already have. Okay, and then you're getting the buy-in from the organization and from the wider team. You're gaining agreement to pursue improvement through evolutionary change. Okay, so we're able to continue with our work and work well with everyone's buy-in to let's all do this together. And a great way of doing that is to encourage acts of leadership at all levels. Give people ownership. Let the developer own the development work, the tester own the test work. And once that work is in that column, that person can then feed back and say where they are and how long they've got left. Also, how much work they can handle at any given time, which contributes to our work in progress limits. Okay. And then we're looking at service delivery principles, where a customer has given a request or has raised a request, and we are trying to deliver what the customer has asked for. Understand and focus on the customer's needs and expectations. Okay, Kanban is very good in putting together lead times and cycle times and how long work will take from one side of the board to the other based on past practices. Okay, let's work with the customer, very similar to Scrum, but this all falls under the umbrella of Agile. Okay, manage the work, let workers self-organize around it. We're going back to our general practices. It says manage flow, it doesn't say manage people. Okay, so manage the flow of work. Let's create a system where it's just continuous from one status, from one policy to the other. Once test has capacity, they will then look to the development column and pull work from there. Once development have capacity, they'll look to the requirements and pull work in from there. So let workers self-organize but let Kanban manage the work. Okay, and regularly review the network and its policies to improve outcomes. Do we have the correct work in progress limits? Are we moving too slow, or are we in fact moving too quickly? Okay, are our policies correct? Do we need to add in another policy, or do we need to take one away, or do we need to leave it as it is? But either way, let's have those conversations and make decisions as a team. Okay, we are evolving experimentally. So as I just go on to the next slide, I'm going to present to you a Kanban board for software delivery. Now it's very animated. There's a lot happening here. We've got policies, you've got to do, and in your to do column, you've got an infinity logo underneath the to do, and that says, oh, well, that the amount of items in that column is countless. You can have as many items in your to do column as possible. And then we go into development, and development are telling me, well, they can only work on 5 items at any given time. And we've split development into code review, unit test, and dev done. And once an item is in development done, it sends a signal to test to say, well, test is ready to pull an item once it's got capacity. So let's talk about test. You've got system integration testing. They are also telling me they can only work on 5 items at any given time. And once they've got capacity to pull in more, they will look at the development done column and pull in an item from there. And then you've got your user acceptance testing. That's telling me that they can only handle 4 items at any given time based on their workload. So once they have capacity, they look into the test done column and they pull in an item, and that creates a system. And then you've got your done column at the end where you've got deployed, and then you've got an infinity logo there saying that you can have as many items in that done column as necessary. And at any given time, I have 14 items working round the clock. So I've got 5 in development, I've got 5 in testing, and 4 in user acceptance testing, giving me a number of 14. This is constant work in progress. ConWIP is what we call it in Kanban. Okay, but we've got these commitment points. Now, what are these commitment points? You've got first commitment point and you've got second commitment point. So the moment we bring in work from our product backlog into our development, we are actively working on it. That is our first point of commitment, and that's where we calculate our lead time from. If we calculate our lead time from the product backlog, that could quadruple in time. You don't know how long an item will sit in our to-do list or in our product backlog for, okay? And then we might have a second commitment point. Once it's gone past UAT and you're now in deployed, that could be then sent out to the deployment team if that's a separate team that work there. And we are then into a second phase of commitment. A lot of the time in Kanban, we only deal with 1 commitment point, but for the sake of this webinar, I've put in 2, okay? And once you're prior to a commitment point, if you need to get rid of any items, you discard them. It won't cost you any money, that it hasn't been worked on. You can delete those items from the product backlog. But once work has started and you need to take away an item, we now call it an abort. And that's where we've already started working on these items. We've started spending money, and this is not a place that we want to be in. Okay, I've also got external dependencies on there. Are they relying on anything outside of our team? And that could potentially be a parking lot, so it doesn't populate the work in progress limits that we have. Okay, and I'm going to move on to our final slide, where we are scaling Kanban. Now, how can we get Kanban all across our organization? Look at our organization. We've got an IT department, we've got customer care, marketing, sales, and we've started in IT. And once we've started using Kanban in IT, we may gradually go across the board. This is not something that can be done in a week or potentially even a month. This could potentially take years, okay, or months in able to get Kanban scaled across the whole organization there. Okay, how do we get the whole organization managing flow, managing their work in progress limit? I think we've done quite well for time. It's just approaching 1/2 past the hour. Well, in the UK, it's 3:30. all around the world. I'm sure you have your respective times, but I'm going to take this opportunity to ask some questions, to answer some questions. Okay, we've got quite a lot here. So let me see if I can pick out at least 3 or 4. Okay. Okay, so Rose has asked how to determine whether a software project should go with Scrum or Kanban framework. And this is very interesting. Now, I've asked this question and have been asked this question many a time. And people say that Scrum is very good for project work, but where you're doing items one by one, a lot of people will go for Kanban. So where it's more like system support and you're picking up tickets, Kanban works great in that essence. But where you're doing projects and you're trying to create, you're trying to work on 10 items at any given time, Scrum works absolutely phenomenal for that. But again, that is not saying that Kanban cannot be used in projects, but Scrum may give you a better roadmap when it comes to projects. So you can say we've got a sprint, we've got a product backlog of 100 items. We're going to work 10 items at a time. So that will be 10 sprints. And we're going to divide these items into our sprints. So you can say, well, this item will be expected by sprint 5, and sprint 5 will be on such a date. And that's where Scrum could be fantastic. And Kanban could also be fantastic in that regard, but even more so when you've got sort of a ticketing system and you're just picking up the next work once you have capacity. Okay, so the capacity in Scrum is when you get to the end of your sprint and you're ready to start a new sprint. Capacity in Kanban is when you've just got capacity in your WIP limit. So a fantastic question there. Thank you, Rose. What are the metrics, key performance indicators that can be measured for Kanban framework projects? I think that's Rose again. I'm going to see if I can pick someone else afterwards, but some good questions there, Rose. So you would have heard me speak about lead time, cycle time. I didn't address this, but cumulative flow diagram. These are diagrams that show you how well we are doing in Kanban. And well, fortunately, you'd have to probably enroll on a Kanban course to get far more into the metrics and how they work. But lead time is all about how long it takes from the first point of commitment to potentially delivery. Cumulative flow diagram is like a burn down chart used in Scrum, but in Kanban you can see where there's any blockers and that you can see the flow of work. So those are very much your key performance indicators and showing how quickly you can get from one side of the board to another. Interesting, Mark has asked which techniques are used to estimate the work during sprint planning. Now this could be a whole course in itself. So you may have heard or may not have heard of story points. Story points is gauging the effort needed to do the work. You also may have t-shirt sizes, small, medium, large, extra large. That is a term that everybody understands. So if you say an item is small, you know it may only take 1 or 2 days. If an item is large or extra large, there'll be more effort that is applied. And then you've got story points, which is loosely based on the Fibonacci series, where you've got 1, 3, 5, 8, 13, 20, and you use those range of numbers to show, well, how much effort does this work need? And then based on those story points, your Scrum Master is able to measure the velocity of how much your team can handle at any given time. So you can literally go back to basics and say, well, this item will take 1 day to work on, or this item will take 5 days to work on. Or you can say it's a small, medium, large in terms of effort, or you can say 1, 3, 5, 8, 13, 20, and 1 starting at your lowest number. Fantastic, great question there, Mark. I'm going to see if I can do 2 more. I'm just going to say Ramak, if I'm allowed to just to say Ramak there, Ramak B. What different roles are in Kanban? Well, that is the great thing about Kanban. Where you have Scrum, you have a Scrum Master, product owner, and developers. In Kanban, you start with where you are now. There are no roles in particular. You can apply Kanban to everywhere. Look at the screen that we have in front of us. You can apply Kanban, and all Kanban does is allow you to manage your flow. Okay, well, it's not all that it does. It allows you to implement work in progress limits. It gives you visualization. It gives you great transparency. You can then calculate lead time, and it's a great method that you will use probably in everyday life. Very much coming from the lean method, and very much used in queuing. Okay, if you've ever gone to a theme park and you've queued up, even queuing at traffic lights as well, very much in time with the Kanban method there. Okay, so I'm going to answer one more final question there. So apologies if I haven't got around to any other questions. We're just looking at time there. So I have picked out 5. If an organization is moving from Scrum to Kanban, what would be the challenges to their development team? What happens to the existing Scrum Master role? Now, this is very, very interesting. You are moving from Scrum to Kanban, or one, you might even implement Kanban with Scrum and call it Scrumban. So you might keep some very key elements of Scrum that work well for you, and you might implement Kanban to work with Scrum, which is very much a Scrumban, is what they call it. But if you're now looking to completely ditch Scrum and implement Kanban, of course, it's very much still an agile way of working. What happens to the existing Scrum role? Well, Kanban doesn't cater to roles as specific. It caters to managing the flow of work, and that would be organization specific. Okay, every organization would have a different answer for that Scrum Master. That Scrum Master could be the end of that project, unfortunately, or they might be able to find a role for the Scrum Master to manage the replenishment meetings, to calculate the lead time, to be able to manage the cumulative flow diagrams, calculate the cycle time, acknowledge how many items can get from one side of the Kanban system to the other, help team members with their work in progress limits, very much what they already do in Scrum, but just looking at the Kanban policies. Okay, so it's 39 minutes past the hour. I've been talking for about 70 minutes now. Always great to speak to the masses. So apologies if I've run over by about 10 minutes, but we've had a fantastic session there. That's just Golden Agile Solutions, the limited company I own, but I deliver courses via KnowledgeHut, which I'm very excited to do, to tell you far more about Kanban, to tell you much more about Scrum, and any other course where Agile and Scrum and Kanban are concerned. So thank you for joining.